So anyway, today we're talking about genealogical research. Now, you don't have to be a brand new person to get anything out of this class, because I hear it that way, so you'll be able to pick something up. For intermediates and experienced researchers as well. So if you've been doing research for a few years, you're still going to learn something. So the 10 things that you absolutely must do in genealogy are: begin with asking your family. I'm going to go through these individually. Use records you can find in your home. Go to the local library. Go to the vital record office and or cemeteries. Begin using online records. Many of them are free. Organize yourself, because there's nothing worse than being disorganized with genealogy. Cite your sources and share your finding with others. Network and join historical or genealogical society if you so wish. So, begin by asking your family. What do I mean by that? Start with your parents if they happen to still be living. Unfortunately, for some reason, we can never figure out why genealogy is a hobby that most people don't do until they're like older for some reason. I don't know why, but it's just that way for the many of them. So if your parents are alive, sit down and have a nice chat with them, and you'll learn a lot. Go see aunts, uncles, and or other relatives. Everybody's got that 104-year-old aunt or uncle somewhere. They are loaded with information, and hopefully they can share it with you. Take notes, or if permitted, record the info. Now, I don't advocate you taking a recorder with you without permission, because people don't like to be recorded and say no. And some people, I find, however, though, if they're being recorded, the conversation tends to be more honest, and there's less buzz in it, overstating of facts when they're recorded. So if they allow you to do it, that's good. Also, I don't care how good you are, you're not going to be able to record everything you hear, because you will forget. Take pictures, unless you're my aunt who grabbed the camera out of my hand and took it away. She didn't want to have a picture taken for whatever reason. And ask if they have any family documents, such as deeds, Bible records, diaries, letters, pictures, etc. Everybody has a picture book or something at home that has to do with the family. Okay, records you have in your house. Believe it or not, there's many of them. Letters, they don't so much write letters anymore, but in the olden days. Diaries, Bible records. Remember the old Bible that your grandparents used to have? A lot of times it had family information recorded. Birth and death certificates. Everybody at least has their own, at least I would hope. Marriage certificates, baptismal records, deeds, divorce records, or any other useful document. Could be anything. Could be an old sampler. In the olden days, they made what they called samplers. They were pictures, and then they had some kind of family information. Go to your local library, search obituaries. Look and see if they have any scrapbooks. Surprisingly enough, you'd be surprised how many do. Search city directories. You don't know where your family lived in town? That's a good way to look it up. And they're available in most libraries. Look for local histories. If your family is from a big town or an old town, look and see if there was a family history written about it. It might have some information about your family. Most of the time they do. And this is an important one. Attend any free classes that may be available. No matter how many times you go to the same class, you're going to pick something up. So if you've been there before and you say, well, I've already been there once, give it another try, because you'll learn even more. And get a library card so you can use your online databases, such as Heritage Quest, and a lot of your larger libraries will allow you to go on to Ancestry and access the records on Ancestry, where you're doing it from home. But there's a difference, though. If I was going to be serious in researching, I would go right for the Ancestry at home. You get a 2-week free trial. Okay, going to your vital records office. If you're in Connecticut, you will need to have a membership card in one of the societies that is incorporated in the state, and the one that is most used, which I have it with me, it's from the Connecticut Society of Genealogists.
I didn't bring it with me, but it's a blue card, you can see down on the bottom. And that allows you to go into any vital records office in the state of Connecticut and actually look at the records. Now, some town clerks will tell you, well, you have to tell me what you want, and I'll bring it out to you, which I don't like when they do that, because I like to poke around and see what I'm, looking at. But most of them are pretty good about letting you to look at the records, and that way you don't have to worry about timing up their time or, wasting time for not doing anything. And try to get certified copies of your direct line, meaning your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. Reason why you want to do that is because if you ever want to join a historical society, a genealogical society or something like the Mayflower Descendants, you want to have a record that's going to be good enough to stand up to scrutiny of them checking. But I wouldn't suggest doing it for all the siblings, because they can be very. And don't forget the cemetery. I mean, you can go in a little look to go look at an old cemetery. They are like books, and they have tons of information. And most importantly, keep track of what you've searched. I can't tell you how many times in the olden days I didn't do that. And I go to a library, get thrilled I found something, come home, throw it on the pile on my desk, forget about it. Couple months, I ended up back to the same library, got all excited again because I found the information. Go home, I already have it. Talk about a waste of time. So you want to keep track of everything you're looking for. All right, begin using online databases. Now in part 2, which we're going to have next month, I'm going to actually show you how to access some of these online databases and the new tricks of them. Heritage Quest is free little library cards. Some of the libraries have what they call Heritage Quest. Ancestry, a lot of your larger libraries will let you use Ancestry, but you want to remember you're not going to be able to build a tree on that because it's a public domain, but you can access records and print them out for your information. Family Search, the Mormon Church, FamilySearch.org is the largest genealogical repository in the world, and it is free. That's the best part. American Ancestors, you've got a lot of New England ancestors. Join what they call the New England Historical and Genealogical Society. They have a fabulous library in Boston, and they also have really good information on their website. It's not cheap, though, it's expensive. Chronicling America, that is through the National Archives, and what that is an old newspaper database. So you go in there and get all the old quirky newspapers. Get obituary. Believe it or not, in the olden days, an obituary was a big thing, not like today. Sometimes you have them, sometimes you don't. But they told quite a story in some of these older obituaries. And also back then, they would tell, this one visited so-and-so who came up from another area of the town and told them. It was more or less like a gossip column. Percy is another one, that it's the Periodical Resource Index. What they did was they went around in the country and they got as many genealogical magazines as they could, copied them and indexed them. So you can go onto this Percy Index and see if you can find an article about your family. Or if you're learning how to research a certain country, you might find something that will help you there. Genealogy Bank, that's a paid website, but that's the one I use for all my newspapers. They have the most of all of them. I think it's $79 a year to join, but it's well worth it if you're going to be a serious researcher. And you'll find with genealogy, it's either something that you love or you just don't care for. There's usually not an in-between. Organize your records. Keep your notes organized and complete. What I do when I go out and do research, I always make sure that I have time on the other end when I get home to file everything, so I know where everything is. Always write your source on the document yourself. If you're not going to copy the title page, which you should always do when you're copying the source, at least write where that information came on the document. I would suggest you do that anyway, if the title is not on that first page if you're looking. Because the information is no good if it can't be tracked down to where it came from. Scan them into your computer. I love to scan. I scan as I go along. Yeah, of course, if you're gonna wait till you have a pile this big, it's gonna be a problem, but if you scan as you go, it's not that hard. Keep your note pages all the same size. Use an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Regular sized piece of paper when you're keeping your notes. Why? Because they'll all fit in a notebook. You don't have to worry about folding them, curving them, something getting lost, something falling out. Even if it's a small piece of paper that has your information on it, put on 8.5 by 11 so you can keep it in a binder or a file. And again, like I said, always file your findings the same day. And you want to use archival materials. You ever see an old newspaper that was all crumbled? Because there was acid in the paper and that's what did it. So for example, in your research, if you come across one of those old newspaper articles that's tearing apart, just make a copy of it, because all our paper now is acid free. Cite your sources. Again, this is a biggie. The difference between a good genealogist and a bad one is your record keeping. Nobody wants to look at your research, especially someone like me who's a professional, if it's not sourced and you don't know where it came from. As far as I'm concerned, it's useless. So make sure that you keep track of everything. Always copy down your sources. If using a computer database, cite the data. You could go on Google, you could go on any of the index, the online encyclopedias they have, and copy off a piece of information. That's still information, right where it came from. So when using Family Tree Maker, which is a genealogy program that you can have on your computer, you always want to enter your source in. Now, the good thing about it is, most of the genealogical software they have nowadays links up with either Ancestry or Family Search. So when you're downloading something, it will automatically put those sources in for you. So I would strongly suggest, if you're going to do serious research, to get what they call Family Tree Maker. It's $39.95, and it's a Family Tree computer database. Any source, again, should be cited no matter what it is. You got on the phone and you called your 106-year-old aunt. She gave you a bunch of information. Write it down. Put the date that it was collected, who you talked to, and you're good to go. Believe it or not, that stands up. Sharing your findings with others. Sharing is caring and leads to a gold mine. And again, don't be afraid to bribe your relatives. What do I mean by that? When I was doing the research on my mother's Hale family, I had to write a book that involved a lot of people who lived in Alabama, the southern states. I didn't know any of these people from Adam. And of course, when I wrote them and asked them for information, they didn't know what I was going to give. So finally I said, gee, there's got to be something else I can do here. What can I do then? So I found out one of our lines came on the Mayflower. So we have this cute little booklet, and I wrote them again. And I would say 9 out of 10 of those people return the information. So that was bribery, but it worked. When you do your research and when you realize you've had enough or you don't want to do it anymore, but if you found something that other relatives would be interested in, don't be afraid to send it off to libraries, cousins, aunts, uncles, or historical societies. It doesn't have to be formally a published book in order for them to take them. They're called manuscripts. Any information you send to a library or repository then becomes a manuscript. Who knows? Somebody may find something interesting in your research. Sharing allows your information to be in more than one place, which is another good thing. I've gathered so much information over the last 40 years that I must have at least 10 filing cabinets, and I've got shelves and shelves of binders and stuff. So I finally said, well, someday I'm not going to be here. What's going to happen to all this stuff? Is it going to get thrown out? I mean, who's going to want all that stuff? So I started copying it and sending it off to different cousins, aunts, relatives and stuff, so that it was in another place, and if something happens, there's a fire or a storm or something, they're good to go. That's when scanning comes in too. And you want to remember this, it's very important. Not all your relatives will have the same passion as you do for your research. They will either care and give you a ton of information, or they don't want to know. Does anybody fall into that category? A relative not? No. Lucky. Network. Network with online blogs and chat rooms. There's plenty of places if you have a dead end or something and you don't know the answer. Post it up on one of these boards and maybe somebody else is researching your face. Most websites again have queries. The query is when you're asking questions for the public. Lost cousins can be found, and that is absolutely true. When I talk about DNA, that's where you really found. Someone may be researching your family. Now, people that have been researching for a while are very familiar when you go on to Ancestry or Family Search of all those old family trees that are on. Well, it's true, they're not verified, and that information could be wrong. But at the same point, it's a good way to find how your family may run, and then all you have to do is verify everything that you find. Not only that, people are posting pictures and family documents to those places now, and I've gotten hundreds and hundreds of pictures that I've downloaded from Ancestry and other sites that I wouldn't have. Join Historical and Genealogical Society. Join your local historical society. Or if not here, in the area where your family lives. They're usually not that expensive. Join a statewide lineage society. Say you found you had a ancestor that fought in the Revolutionary War. You can join the DAR or the SA. Or Mayflower, you can join Mayflower. There are thousands of organizations you can join. Even they have what they call Sons of a Witch. Get an online database subscription. By that, I mean either Ancestry or Family Search. Those are the two major ones. Family Search is familysearch.org. That's the Mormon website. What they'll ask you, they want you to open an account so they at least know who's accessing your records. They don't ask for a credit card. They don't charge you. It's all free. Just that they know that when you're signing in, signing up. And that's a free one. Ancestry, depending upon what you want to use, it could go anywhere from $20 a month to $50 a month, depending on which services you want to use. If you get the jumbo packet, I think it's $500 a year. The internet gold mine. There's everything online, as we all know. Google anything you ever want to know, and you'll find things. The same way with genealogy. Not everything is there, but a good chunk. Blogs and chat rooms again, websites. How many in the room have heard of Cindy's? Anybody heard of Cindy's list? Cindy's list is a huge index, everything genealogy, and it's all free. There's no databases on it per se, but if you want to learn, say you want to learn how to speak to read Spanish documents or German documents, they have ways to teach you all that stuff online. So give it a check. Finding Aids, Facebook is a big. Facebook has been wonderful for me because I have met, I don't know how many cousins that I wouldn't have met otherwise. I do occasionally run into a problem with some of them when I tell them, oh, I love that picture I downloaded for my scrapbook. And they would tell me, that's my picture. No, it's not. Once it goes online, it's public information, unless you take it off. So, you know, but you'll find a lot of cousin pictures, relative pictures, and Cindy's different stuff. Okay, my favorite websites, of course, are Ancestry, American Ancestry, which is from the New England Historical Society. The US Gen Web is another free site. It's set up by state, and you can go in there, and they have different moderators that handle certain towns. And sometimes there you'll find a lot of those quirky databases that you wouldn't find else. Family Tree DNA, and I'm going to talk about DNA in a couple minutes. FamilyHistoryStore.com. I love that place. You want to get a chart or a booklet or something on something, how to organize your information. You want a big family pedigree chart. This is the place to go. FamilySearch.org. We talked about that's the Mormon website. My favorite research libraries are the Connecticut State Library. Has anybody ever been up there in their genealogy department? really nice. Connecticut Historical is another one in Hartford. Godfrey Library in Middletown. Anybody been to the Godfrey in Middletown? That's everything genealogy, and it's free. You go in there and use their library. Middletown. It's a cute little library. I mean, you know, it's small, but they have quite a bit of information. Connecticut Society of Genealogists has a library as well in West Hartford. New England Historical Society in Boston. I have to be careful when I'm up there because they have every new genealogy book that's been out and all kinds of how-to things. So I'm not careful. Put too much in my credit cards. Linda has. You know, it's true you get a lot of stuff online, but for some reason I still like holding it. Old Saybrook Historical only because I work. Okay, DNA. How many in the room have had their DNA done? Anybody? Did you do anything with it, or did you just look at it and shook my head?
Been going through.
Okay. Because DNA could be a gold mine for you when you're doing research, and I'll tell you why. Because it doesn't do any good having your DNA done if you're not going to put a family tree up so that people know how they're related to you. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have 1,000 names up there, but sometimes 4 or 5 generations is all you need to be able to connect with somebody. But if you, between using your DNA and Ancestry, anytime somebody has theirs done, they will post it and let you know you have a link to them at some degree. You could be a third cousin 5 times removed or something of that nature. But if you don't have the tree on there, they're not going to know how you're related. So you're wasting your time by having the DNA, if you did it for genealogy purposes. But very important when you do DNA to do a family tree. They have what they call a Y-DNA, which is the male, which tests you to your father, to your grandfather, and so forth and so on. And then we have an mtDNA, which is your mother, to grandmother, to great, all the way back. Sometimes you can solve certain problems with DNA and genealogy, but at the same point, it's still a very new concept. So they're still trying to work out the bugs in that. And I'll tell you why. I've had mine done about 5 times. The first time it told me that I had 15% Native American blood, which I thought was too much. I do have Native American blood in me, but I didn't think that much. But I went with it and I said, well, I wish I knew how they figured this out. Make a long story short, I had 4 more done after that. Now it tells me I have no opinions. Because what they considered to be the markers for Indian research back then is not true now. So it erased. So that's what, if you do your DNA and you go on there and you don't look at it for like 6 months or a year, they update it. So if you see it's a different mixture in you, like somehow it tells me I have like 30% Scotch in me. I have no idea what it is. I really don't. So I still think that's a mistake, but apparently not. Most people, when they have it done though, for DNA, it's what they have, the autosomal or deep ancestral origins test. That will tell you how much English you are, French, German, Italian, whatever. And that's why most people have it done, because they want to see what that is. But it really doesn't help you with much in terms of research. Favorite publications: Connecticut Nutmeggers through the Connecticut Society of Genealogists, and their sister publication, the Genealogy News, American Ancestors Magazine. Does anybody in here buy Family Tree Magazine at all? No? Okay. The New York G&V out of New York. The New England Historical Register. The New York G&V, which is the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society from New York City. And NEHG, it should be NEHGS, as the New England Historical and Genealogical Society. Those 2 societies publish a journal, which are done by what they call professional genealogists from FASG. They're from the society, a special society that only certain people can get into. But if you're researching, you find information in any of those 2 journals, you're good to go. You don't really need anything else, because it's been so well researched that all the documentation would already be there. Family Tree magazine, you can buy it in a local bookstore. I think it's $5. But they have little tips and things, and like 1 month they'll tell you, well, how to read your Italian research, how to read your German research. So it's a very helpful publication. And I think if you get it for the whole year, it's $29. Nothing. Google your family tree. A friend of mine wrote that book, and that's very helpful. Most of your libraries have it. Okay, the forms. These are just some of the forms. And I'm not going to go over everyone because that will be helpful. And what I did was I brought a few of the forms with me that I thought was helpful. And not everybody was here when I was explaining. One of them, which seems to interest everybody, is what they call a relationship chart. How many times has somebody said, oh, I'm your fourth cousin 3 times removed or whatever? What does that mean? This little chart will tell you. Then I also have, there's our record checklist. You're not sure what to look for, or you might have information here that you're not looking at. This helps. Then if you're just starting out and you're brand new, these 2 items are a must. One is called a pedigree chart, and the other is called a family group sheet. In genealogy, we do things kind of backwards. We don't start from the earliest ancestor and move forward. We start with you and work your way back. That's why you need to have at least a 5-generation pedigree chart. If you come into the Historical Society and you say, I want you to help me with your research, I'll say, where's your pedigree chart? 9 times out of 10, they don't know what they are, so I have to fill one out for them, but it would have saved a lot more time if this was already done. And this is for your direct ancestral line. This other form here, the family group sheet, is because you're not only going to record information on your direct line, you're going to do the siblings as well. And the reason why you do that is because sometimes you'll find information through a sibling that you won't find through your direct line. What do I mean by that? A death certificate. They had 10 children in the family. You got death certificates for 3 and the parents weren't named. Well, there's 7 more to look at. Check those and see if the parents are, and if you didn't have that, information, you wouldn't know where to go from there. Okay, another one that I didn't bring with me, but this is a vital record chart. If you're interested in a particular state in the United States, this will tell you when they started keeping birth, marriage, and death. So, for instance, let's pick on Wisconsin. You need a death certificate in Wisconsin from 1895. Are you going to find it there? They start in 1907, so no, you're not going to find it. Now, does that mean that record may not exist anywhere? No, because there could be special collections or different towns that kept better records than others. But if you're looking for an easy way to find that document, you're not, because the recording of the vital records were not required until 1907. Correspondence law. You want to write down every time you call somebody, talk to somebody, whatever. Why? Because you want to make sure you're not going to bother them again if you already talked to them. Plus, you want to have track of who you spoke with. In case you forgot somebody, you'll have a list of those that you already spoke to. Family group sheet, we talked about relationships, we talked about research packing list. There's one of those up there. Source documentation cheat sheet. This is another good one. Well, I found a piece of information and I know where it came from, but how am I supposed to record that in the records? This will tell you there's certain ways that us genealogists do that, so that you'll know to do it in the same form. Research repository checklist, that's another good one. Keep track of all the libraries and societies you go to. The research calendar, same thing. Extract, they have extract logs for everything, deeds, birth certificates. What I used to do, and I don't do it so much now, because a lot of them will let you take a picture of the certificates, but in the olden days, when I would go doing a lot of birth, marriage, and death record information. I don't care how good you are, you always forget something, write it down on a piece of paper. So I took a blank birth, marriage, and death certificate, whited it out and copied those, so when I go into a repository, I use the same format, so I make sure I don't miss it. Because there's nothing worse than having to go back and get the same information twice. Cemetery transcription form. There's forms for everything, ancestral chart, research notes. And I'm not saying you have to use these forms, you can make your own, but just be standard when you're doing it, so that if somebody is gonna take over your research or you give it to somebody, they're gonna know how you organize things and how you did your research, so they don't have to start all over. A sad example was many years ago, I volunteered at the Family History Center in Woodbridge. And a little old man came in with 2 big boxes of genealogical material that his wife had gathered over the years. I looked at it, very well written, very detailed, but there wasn't a source on it. No good. But I wasn't going to throw it away. I said, I'll ship it off to Salt Lake City and let them deal. Don't know if they ever did, probably not, because it would, if you've got to go back and retrack everything that someone else had done, you might as well do it yourself. That's the way I. Okay, 10 common genealogy traps. Not asking relatives for information when they're alive. How many times did we say, oh, if my grandmother was still alive, she'd know the answer to that question? Well, she's not, unfortunately. Relying too much on the internet, I'm going to talk about all these individually. Neglecting your sources. Sticking to one spelling. Taking secondary sources at face value. Dismissing conflicting information. Crossing the ocean too quickly. Focusing solely on the facts. No, that sounds ridiculous, but I'll explain. Buying into family legends, and every family has those. And giving up too soon. So, not asking relatives. Genealogists kick themselves over the ones that got away. Those are the relatives now deceased you've always put off visiting or never thought to ask about family history. Since family members are often the only source for the backstory, talking to them should always be at the top of your genealogy to-do list. I always kick myself for not probing for information when my grandmother was alive, where answers to my questions could have been solved if she was alive today. Because I know she would know the answer to this one question I have, but I can't find it. And yes, even though I've been researching for 40 years, I have dead ends too. Relying too much on the internet, contrary to common misconception of wishful thinking. It's not possible to do all the genealogy done right. You will still need to turn to traditional methods to get some records. I.e. probate files, newspapers, family histories, and some military pensions are just a few that fall into this group. This may mean a visit to the Family History Center, a library, archive, as a lineage specialist, many people try to submit proof of lineage by printing off items they find in Ancestry.com, the World Family Tree, or Family History Center's ancestral file. Although they can be used as guidelines, the errors are plentiful and are not based on facts. Okay, as a lineage specialist, many people try to submit proof of lineage by printing off items they find in these trees, so you can't do it. Again, use them as a guideline. There's nothing wrong with looking at them and see if anybody's doing research in your family, but don't count on it unless you have the actual records there that prove what they put down on it. Neglecting the cite sources. Whenever you find new information, you might say you'll write it down and the name of the book later, or think you'll never need to look at that particular source again. But what if your photocopy gets lost or you find conflicting information later and need to cross-reference your first reference? Document everything, even if it's just a casual conversation with a cousin who gave you a tidbit of information on your family. I keep extensive journals and notebooks each and every time I go out in the field. I have telephone conversations or read an article or a book about my family. I can't tell you how important this is, and it's a good habit to develop. Get into that position of writing down your sources, because Don't be like I was. Go to join a lineage society 40 years ago, and I needed to know where something came from, and I didn't. I had to go find it again. It's wasteful time. Sticking to one spelling, limiting your searches to a single name or spelling, and you'll undoubtedly miss a person in key records. Due to marriage, immigration, release from slavery, and other reasons, your ancestor might have used several different names during their lifetime, or may have been misspelled in a transcription of the original record. Now, a lot of people say, well, my family had a different name in the old world than they do here. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, if they were German, a lot of them tried to de-Germanize the name because they didn't want anything to do with Hitler back then. Also, a lot of the transcribers that were on the boat, when you got ready to go on the boat, they didn't always know the native language, so they wrote it down the way it sounded. So your name may be a butchered, your actual name you use now may be a butchered name from what it was actually. So bearing that in mind, if you have one of those unusual names, it could be changed. Make sure if you're looking for information that you look for all those different spellings and not just the one. Create a list of variant spellings for your ancestral names. Many online databases use a sounds like, or what they call Soundex. Soundex is a code they made where everything's grouped by the way the name sounds. So no matter how it's spelled, if it sounded a certain way, it was categorized in the rest of the names that sounded that way. So, which was a good thing. It was a genius, whoever created that. If you suspect a relative is in the records, try every possible spelling variation before dismissing that they may not be in the records you're looking at. Taking secondary sources at face value. Resist temptation to automatically believe everything you hear from relatives, read in a county history, or find in an online transcription. These are so-called secondary sources, someone who looked at another source long after the original events and incorporated the information into your family story, the history book or transcription. Nobody's perfect. Most family history have some minor or even major errors. Another classic pitfall, if you're on the internet, it must be true. The web is a valuable research tool, but the indexes, pedigree databases, and transcriptions are again only secondary sources. There could be errors, and you must find the original record to verify that information. My rule of thumb is I don't consider a date to be a date until I can back it up with 3 different sources. It's not always possible, but for the most part, it can be. Dismissing conflicting information. It's easy to get tunnel vision when it comes to your ancestors. Your research may be humming along just fine when you run across a name, a date, or a place that doesn't quite mesh with the records you've already found. So you decide, it doesn't match what I know, so it must be wrong. No, errors will surface in records, and careful analysis will often be needed to be used to get these true facts. Now, again, if you have 3 things pointing to the same date, you know you're good to go. That mainly comes in, believe it or not, in Bible records, because a lot of times when they put the family information in the family Bible, they put the baptismal date in instead of the birth date. That's why you might have differences there. A tombstone is another one, okay? Tombstones, what's put on there was put on there by a relative, and hopefully they knew the date, but that didn't always happen, believe it or not. Sometimes they'll have the wrong date on a tombstone. Same thing with a death certificate. Information in a death certificate is only as good as the informant. So if you had an informant who wasn't a close family member, they may have given information that was wrong. I've come across that I don't know how many times. Very annoying, actually. I'd rather you leave it blank than put the wrong information. Crossing the ocean prematurely. Trying to find a church record or other record in another country before you know where your family comes from is like searching for a needle in a haystack. That's why you start with yourself and work your way back. Make sure you have exhausted all the records here before you go overseas. Look for your immigrant ancestors' hometown in immigration, vital church, and/or census records on this side of the ocean before going abroad. You will save a lot of time and money. I had somebody came in one day with a genealogy book. I think he had John Mason or somebody from Saybrook. And he goes, I know that's my ancestor. I said, well, how do you know? Did you trace it? Well, no, because I just followed all the lines down and my family was in the same area. I said, well, how do you, that's not proof. So I had to go over with him how you start with yourself and you work your way back. I don't think he ever got it or didn't want to fuss with it, but that's his problem. Focusing solely on facts, having the dates of a birth, marriage, and death are nice and valuable, but don't forget all your other wonderful records. Try to find old family photographs, and hopefully they won't be like my family where nobody wrote on the back of them. Look at land or real estate records to find out more about the house or farm, or borrow local history books from the library or historical society to get events on the lives of your ancestors. Now, some people are happy just having the birth, marriage, and death record, but I'm not. I want to know every nosy detail I can about all my relatives. So I check the land records, I do probates, I do church records, I do it all. And that gives you a real upfront picture of your ancestor. All of these items help create the whole picture of your ancestors' lives and make your research much more valuable and interesting to others. Now, how many times I had cousins send me a genealogy that had all just the births and dates and stuff in it? You know what I did with it? That bores me. I don't care. I want to know all the juicy details. So next time you see a relative, ask them about the early years of their life and what they remember. Just have a little conversation. And if you're one of those older ones, like I'm getting to be, make sure that you are generous with your information to your children, nieces and nephews or whatever. Buying into family legends, that's a big one. How many in the room have had family legends? And they all turned out to be not true, right? Yeah. Absolutely. Wanting to share the limelight with the rich and famous is nothing new. But just because Grandpa said you come from nobility or celebrity stock doesn't mean it's true. So before you take on the frenzied quest to find your connection to Prince Charles or Brad Pitt, remember the basics. Start with yourself and work your way back to that famous ancestor. It's always been family folklore that we were related to Elvis Presley, as my great-grandfather's middle name was Presley. In searching the records, this came to be a true fact. But there are many other examples where the records did not prove the fact to be true. In that case, it was, and it's funny because as I researched that entire line, you could see how the musical ability came down just in that line of the family. Nobody else had it. There were a few here and there, but all the way down, even my mother was an accomplished pianist, and my brother's a musician too. I'm not. I couldn't play a note on the piano, but I have other talents, which I find more useful. All right, giving up too soon. How many people have done that? Of course, we all have. You've come to a brick wall and you're frustrated. My tip, put this line aside and go back to it later. Why? As you increase your research skills, that brick wall may not be so solid when you go back to it later armed with new research talent. I found things that I considered a brick wall that I put aside, and 10 years went by before I even looked at it. And then when I went and pulled up the information, it was right there. Well, there were two reasons, right? Either it wasn't online when I looked at it, or I didn't know where the heck to look for it. And I think the latter was probably true. So you get a brick wall, you think you've come to the end, go back and recheck because information comes online all the time. I have dozens of examples. What I thought was a brick wall, put it aside and went back years later and found the information on the first try. Again, new records come online daily, and it could be one of the newest databases will be all that is needed to find your missing link. I find it hard to believe that somebody could live 50, 60, 70, 80 years and not leave some record somewhere. I don't care if the courthouse was burned or not. There's got to be something somewhere. And I defy anybody to prove me that's incorrect. And I'm still waiting. Okay, so with that, thank you and happy searching.